You. Welcome, friends. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it all?
Yes, that looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to provide a brief update on kind of a wider project that I've joined in with. But before we get to that, we had a few weeks ago just an exciting presentation on Kirsopp Lake, and I think a potential suggestion of a forgery. And so we wanted to just take a fresh look. Did Kirsopp Lake forge any F1 manuscripts? And no, he didn't. And so we were able to just get that out of the way. I know that many people were just fascinated and dying to know any of that. But as we've been looking at family one in Luke, I took Professor Parker's list from his recent article on the CBGM in F1, and we've kind of inputted some of this into a spreadsheet to illustrate really where we are, I think, on current research status of the Gospels. And so, we had several decades ago at this point, Dr. Anderson completing her work on Matthew. In the last few years, Dr. Wellesby with her work on John, and then just a few years ago, Dr. Anderson and Jessica Schau presenting some research on Mark. I think one of them may have even been this colloquium, but certainly in SPL. And so then as we look to the future, we have started some of the beginning stages of our research on Luke within F1. And so we are in the beginning stages of that. We are transcribing. And so we've got full transcriptions right now of a few Venice group manuscripts in Luke 205 and 2886. And so between Dr. Anderson and I, we're currently looking at GA1 and getting a second for 205. And so I actually have here a really interesting omission, and that screenshot is of 205. And so we've got a pretty long omission that we've noticed within Venice group manuscripts. That's just exciting and fun to kind of navigate some of that. And so to give you an idea of kind of what we're going through here, this is a picture of 205, and it's a physically large codex. I think Alan Farnes gives some description in his dissertation. He went to Venice and physically handled some of the manuscripts, and so he sent me back some pictures, but they're averaging around 55 lines per page right now, and so we are navigating that, working our way through that manuscript. And so what I wanted to do was provide just some of our next steps on the project, and would love some of your feedback. We will have full transcriptions of all known family members, reconciled and collated. And from there, our methodology will establish family readings. And so if you remember with Dr. Anderson's presentation and Jessica Schau's of their method in Mark, it's going to be similar in establishing those unique family readings. And so what we'll do is collate 1582, 1, and 2193 against Robinson Pierpont. And so from there we can establish our unique family readings that we would kind of have as core members of the family. And so once that data is in hand, we'll proceed with our textual analysis. And I think the ultimate goal then is, not the ultimate, but a primary goal then is to, much like everyone else has done, have a proposed stemma for the family within Luke. And so I think that's something that's important. And so as we look ahead, we've got even new suggested family members that are being added on my my spreadsheet and in one of my earlier slides, I added Daryl Post's suggested members. He wrote a guest blog for Evangelical Textual Criticism. And so I've got a little asterisk down on his proposed members that we will follow up on. And as we continue to use things like Loomster's textual clusters tool and these types of things to assess possible new members within the family. And, you know, I think we all understand that that family will continue to grow. So we're not at a static number, right? And so then as new and fresh analysis, I mean, even in the year since Dr. Anderson's dissertation, right, we see that that field, just that area and domain growing. And so it's our goal and desire to then combine findings from Mark and Luke. And I think, you know, we might have some, I think we may see some interesting, even codicological traits that kind of pop up as we have fresh eyes on some of the interior gospels versus having Matthew and John in many codices. And so having the interior gospels there analyzed. And so ultimately we'd like a final publishable form of Mark and Luke together. But then if we zoom out, I think that it is worth then revisiting Matthew. Professor Anderson had her great study, but at the time she was using test passages. And so for the sake of being thorough, I think we probably would like to go ahead and in the long term provide full transcriptions. She had full transcriptions of 1 and 1582, I believe, but adding in the other family members that have even since been proposed and added to. And so not that we're expecting to change results, but we do think that's an important step, even as we look at Family 1 as potentially building methodology to apply to other clusters of manuscripts that have textual affinity to one another. And so I would also say then there's a lot of value once some of these things are done and we're able to look at the full 4 Gospels, kind of bird's eye view. Looking at the CBGM's treatment of all the Gospels, I think is going to be an important step and something that we're keen to continue to explore. And so, you know, I'm reminded of Dr. Parker's ending of his recent article in on the Gospel of John with the CBGM, that, you know, the method then can help verify or dispel some of our analysis, and it's a good measuring stick, or it's a good comparison for some of the findings that we are you know, we're going through and publishing and exploring and presenting even. And so that's something that we're keen to do, but the data needs to be there on the transcription side, on the analysis side, and then we can kind of go on from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. So again, I invite any questions in the chat or by raising a hand. It does strike me that what you've just shown in terms of making full transcriptions is a good example of how working digitally can benefit all of us, in that the manuscripts which have already been transcribed for the ECM are there waiting for you, and that selection can be supplemented with groups of any manuscripts which are thought to be of particular interest as potential family members or not. Yeah,
the column in John just shows the testament of the work that was done.
But equally in Mark, you know, the fact that there are full transcriptions of so many of the Mark manuscripts now done for the ECM, and the importance of not reinventing the wheel by transcribing the same manuscript more than twice. Would anybody else like to ask Matt anything or observe? If not, do I get a second question? I'd just like to ask you, you showed us the Venice group. Have you any thoughts yet on the relationship of 205 and 2886, which is something that Alan Farnes has looked at, and of course Alison Wellesby?
Yeah, and Schmidt before him back in the 60s, and then obviously Lake. So I have thoughts. I don't know if Dr. Anderson would like to chime in. It seems, just because when you're looking at the data, I would say there's not a clear cut parent-child relationship that we can establish. I think you could do something. It's much easier to argue, I think, something like a sibling type relationship. So I wouldn't want to speak prematurely.
No, but we'll watch that space. But thank you for this bonding. Okay, well, I think then, seeing no other immediate conversations, it's time to move to our final paper for the day. I hope we're not feeling too fragmented after these many fragments one after another. But thank you, Matt.